Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah. Welcome to the afternoon session. We have the first talk by Vignesh Venkataramana Rao on statistical inference of FRB environments using galaxy number density.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. So, am I audible? Okay. My name is Vignesh, and before starting my slides, I would like to thank the organizing committee, especially Professor Jayanta, for giving me this opportunity to present my research. Also, for being so patient for requesting when I was requesting to change my talk from yesterday to today. So apart from that, I would like to thank the members of Spotlight team who were so patient enough and taking care of me when I was sick. So saying this, keeping this in mind, I would like to introduce all to my research, which is understanding the galactic environment around FRBs and trying to figure out whether repeaters and non-repeaters share same galactic environment or different galactic environment. So for the past 1 week or 10 days, so we have been hearing on what are FRBs. However, I would like to give my way of introduction. So FRBs are bright radio transients that is happening across different parts of the sky, which means, and from the dispersion measure that we calculate, most of these sources are originating from the extragalactic space, which means that the FRBs, at least majority of the FRBs are coming from galaxies that are not Milky Way, so that are outside the Milky Way. Also, after observing many FRBs, we can say that we can classify FRBs based on the repetition nature. Okay. So we can classify based on the repetition nature. One is repeaters and one is non-repeaters. A simple explanation is that if you if you receive a signal from a same source at the same location more than once, then we can classify it as repeaters. And if you receive only signal for one time from a same source and same location, then we classify it as non-repeaters. Quite easy one. Since we don't know what astrophysical event that produces these kind of FRB signals, here are some of the interesting progenitor candidates for both repeater population and non-repeater population. So for the case of repeaters, people you often associate repeater bursts with events from magnetosphere of a magnetar, whereas if non-repeaters are often associated with more of a cataclysmic event such as collision between two binary neutron stars that could trigger an FRB event, or accretion induced by white dwarf collapse that could trigger an FRB event. So it is important for us to understand the differences or similarities in these progenitor types. Thereby, we can understand the origin of FRB as well. So one way of understanding the differences or similarities is by localizing each FRB to its particular host galaxy and trying to study the properties, or like trying to study the host galaxy itself, which is a tedious process. So here I would like to introduce an alternative way where instead of localizing every FRB to its host galaxy, we can consider a large-scale galactic environment surrounding each FRB. And depending on the number density of the galactic environments, we can try to, at least I try to answer in this analysis whether non-repeating FRBs and repeating FRBs come from same or different galactic environment. So basically, if both the population come from same environment, which means that they could share a same progenitor type. And if it comes from different galactic environment, that means that it could share a different progenitor type. So So for the sample selection, I have chose catalog 1, Chime catalog 1, which approximately have around 500 sources. And for the Galaxy samples, I have chose YSPS1 catalog. So this is an example of how I calculate the galaxy number density for each FRB, thereby understanding its environment. So if you guys accept and believe that this object is considered to be a Chime telescope, and sorry for my very crude drawing. So if you believe that this is Chime telescope and this star corresponds to the location of FRB, and this circle, magenta circle, corresponds to the physical size surrounding the FRB, then I am interested in understanding the galactic environment. I don't want the contribution from foreground or background. So what I do is that I simply reject these contribution by taking a redshift slice around this particular FRB. So for the width of the slice, I use the uncertainty from the McQuart relation. So if you solve DMIGM versus Z, you can find a spread of the function. So I can get the uncertainty by solving how spread it is. And using that, I can calculate the upper bound and lower bound of the redshifts for each FRB source, which I'll use as width parameter here. So this is projected on the image on the right side. So basically this box consists of 100 by 100 megaparsec region across the FRB. And this red star consists of the position of the FRB in terms of galactic coordinates L and B. You might ask, what is physical distance? So basically what I did is that in Python, there is a package called as angular diameter distance, which can convert my galactic coordinates L and B into its physical distances with the help of the redshift of FRB. So this physical distance represents such calculation. So what I basically do is that I count the number of galaxies within this fixed aperture. The size of this aperture is around 6 megaparsec. And basically there are there are 303 galaxies within this fixed size, at least for this case of this particular FRB. So to figure out whether my FRB lies in high dense environment or low dense environment, what I do is that I compare this with reference densities taken at 10 power 5 random positions within this particular field. So this aperture, this random aperture will also have the same physical size of 6 megaparsec. And I'll calculate the number of galaxies within each such random aperture and try to estimate the galaxy number density. So, okay, once I got the galaxy number density, is this enough to calculate my density, environment? No, we want to normalize to avoid some biases that is created on the observational side. So for that purpose, I calculate a coordinate, quantity called as density increment. So if we believe that rho I is the the galaxy number density of ith aperture, and sigma p is the standard deviation of the entire distribution, the first stage what I do is that I'll introduce a quantity called as delta I, which is nothing but a normalization of each galaxy number density of each aperture with the standard deviation of the entire distribution. So after that, I will make sure that my histogram, peak of the histogram coincides with 0, so that I can clearly identify whether my FRB is in high dense environment or low dense environment. So for this particular FRB, this is one of the examples that I've used in my analysis. So for this particular FRB, which is shown in the previous slide, you can see these are same FRBs. So this green color corresponds to the galaxy number density at the position of FRB. And this entire distribution corresponds to the galaxy number density of random apertures. So from this, it is clearly shown that my FRB lies in 6 sigma level high dense environment compared to the reference apertures. So the significance of doing these kind of normalization is that first is we can avoid Malmicus bias which is an observational bias that usually happens when we try to use galaxy catalog. So basically, what does it mean is that there is a chance or preference of observing intrinsically bright objects than faint objects. So these could introduce some observational biases, and that is called as Malmix's bias. So by doing this normalization, we can overcome this bias. Also, by doing this kind of normalization, it is easy for us to figure out whether my FRB lies in overdense or underdense region compared to my reference densities. After doing the same process for all the FRBs, so I forgot to mention that for my analysis, I have taken 238 of non-repeaters and 26 of repeaters. You might ask why this particular number? Because I have certain selection criteria which an FRB has to satisfy in order to include in my analysis. And after passing certain selection criteria, these are the results. You can see that from the p-value after doing the KS test, there is not much significance in terms of the difference between repeaters and non-repeaters galactic environment. However, we didn't stop our analysis here, because in previous lectures, previous literature studies like Ravi et al. 2019, James 2023, and Yamasaki et al. 2024, they claim that at least certain amount of non-repeaters from chime sample are supposed to be repeaters if we observe them for long period of time. In that sense, those data points are supposed to bias our results. So it is our duty to remove those data points and redo the analysis once again. So this is what I mean, the concept of repeater contamination. You can see that this GIF corresponds to the field of view of chime telescope, which is very narrow. And the figure on the right side is the dynamic spectra and the light curve for a famous FRB, which is the galactic magnetar. Let us assume that since my chime field of view is very narrow, it was only able to view this part of the spectrum and did not view this part of the spectrum. In that sense, we only have one peak, one signal from a same source. So we classify it as non-repeaters. However, if we increase the time window, there is a chance that we could have captured the second burst. So this is what I mean by misclassification. So technically, this is supposed to be a repeater, but due to the time constraint and observational time window, it is classified as non-repeater. So at least for the previous literatures, they claim that at least 50% of such contamination has happened in my chime catalog 1, which we want to remove it. So this is again a very crude drawing of what I'm trying to do here. So if we believe that this red curve corresponds to the PDF of confirmed repeaters, then my goal is to statistically remove the blue data points that are very close to this red curve, thereby obtaining true values of non-repeaters. So this process is completely random, which means that different, so let's take a way of removing these could result in one p-value. Then another set of these removal could result in different p-value, which means that we have to consider to remove these kind of selection biases in my later part of the analysis. So this is the result after doing such removal process. You can see that initially my non-repeaters count was around 238, but now it is reduced to 119, which is technically 50% of my initial point. So now you can see that from the p-value, it is evident that my repeaters and non-repeaters share a different galactic environment compared to this p-value. Also, if you look closely, we can see that the repeaters are often originating in low-dense galactic environment compared to non-repeaters. So is it enough to declare that my repeaters or non-repeaters are coming from same or different galactic environment? The answer is no, because KS test is a statistical test, which means that if I repeat any statistical test multiple times, the chances of getting the false positive increases. So this is called as look elsewhere effect, LEE. And there are famous methods to overcome these look elsewhere effects. One is Bonferroni correction, another one is home Bonferroni method. And the third one, which I use in this analysis, is like Westphalian min-p method. So this is one of the strongest method to put a strong constraints on these kind of LEE. So the method is pretty much simple. We start with the null hypothesis, which states that my repeaters and non-repeaters are coming from same galactic environment. Then this is the observed p-value that we had, which is done before doing this correction. So how do I do this correction? The first step is that I combine my data. Since according to my null hypothesis, both repeaters and non-repeaters are basically the same. So I combine my repeaters and non-repeaters to make a pseudo data set of 145 samples. Then I split them randomly to get 26 pseudo repeaters, and the rest are supposed to be non-repeaters. Then we perform KS test and store the p-value as pseudo p-value. Then we repeat the same process 10,000 times. So for the fraction of number of times when my pseudo p-value is less than observed p-value, we store the number in a name called as adjusted p-value. And my adjusted p-value is like less than 0.05. We can say that the null hypothesis can be successfully rejected. So this is the working process of Westphalian min-p method. And as I said earlier, that my choice of selecting 50% contamination is completely random. In that sense, I need to remove the selection of any selection effects that is triggered by choosing a different set of non-repeaters. So for that process, I repeat the entire analysis, right from choosing a 50% contamination to doing the Westphal min-p method, entire process 1,000 times to remove such biases. And the figure on the left side, you can see that the x-axis has the adjusted p-value, and the y-axis has how many data points basically have this particular p-value. So out of 1,000 trials, 495 trials satisfy this condition of p less than 0.05, which means that actually this itself is enough to, we can say that we can successfully reject null hypothesis. But we have to figure out whether this result came from a random coincidence, which can be done by multiplying the threshold, which is 0.05, times the number of trials, which is 1,000. So multiplying 0.05 into 1,000 will give you around 50, which means that out of 1,000 trials, let's say 50 trials have satisfied this particular condition. Then during that particular scenario, we can say that we should not reject null hypothesis, because this this 50 trials could have been a result of random coincidence. But you can see that for my analysis, I have got 495, which is almost half the data, almost half the number of trials. Apart from that, Tribbiani et al., a famous paper in genetics. So basically these guys, people from genetics usually use this Westphalian permutation process. So Tribbiani et al., what he claims is that, so you can see there is a cluster of data points near 0. I mean, like basically there is a high cluster of data points near 0, which also indicates that this is a result when your data has a true significant difference, and it is not a chance. I mean, like it is not a result of chance, random coincidence. So keeping these two in mind, we can successfully reject the null hypothesis and state that my repeaters and non-repeaters are coming from different environment. So also we wanted to figure out, so initially we started by using 50% as the threshold, and we rejected 50% to obtain our results. But we wanted to figure out at what percentage of repeater contamination you can see a clear difference between repeaters and non-repeaters. So this line corresponds to the case where we can, so basically if my data point is above this line, we can reject null hypothesis, and my data points are below this line, we have to consider null hypothesis. So you can see that approximately somewhere between 30 to 40%, and above the threshold of 40%, it is evident that we can see a clear significant difference between repeaters and non-repeaters. So to conclude my talk, using our statistical method, we have figured out that repeaters and non-repeaters share a different galactic environments. Thereby, it could share different progenitor types as well. Yeah. So for the future works, I would like to compare the same, do the same analysis and compare with different progenitor scenarios like supernova, type 1 supernovae or LGRBs, SGRBs that could show any differences or similarities. Thank you.
Time for one or two questions. Are there?
Hi, very interesting talk. I was just curious that in one of the slides you were talking about the how you decided sample for your studies, those 238 and 36.
Yeah.
And you said it need to be fulfilled, those FRBs need to fulfill certain criteria to be included in your study. What are those criteria?
Yeah. Actually, I recently included this. So you can see this is from my paper, and these are the criteria for an FRB to satisfy. So basically, the FRB should have the sky coverage, same sky coverage as YSPS1. Then the galactic magnitude should be about 20 degree. The reason for this is that, so if my source is less below 20 degree, the chances of getting a good image reduces because of the interstellar dust contribution. Then I should have the redshift range of less than 0.8 because the completeness of YSPS1 catalog reduces above 0.8. So also for my, so since I use McQuart relation, DMIGM versus redshift to, and I solve the FR, I mean like, I solve that particular equation to get the FRB redshift. There is a chance that for some FRBs, we could also get a negative redshift. So those are rejected. Then, so even if we are above 20 degree, there is still a chance that my galactic field around FRB is somewhat inhomogeneous, which means there is a clumps of data point in one particular place, and there is a huge gap around one particular position. So if I take the galaxy number density for different apertures in that particular sample, that could also possibly bias my sample. So these are the IFRB criterias that I use to take my sample.
Thank you. And is this paper somewhere online? Is submitted?
Yeah, I have just submitted. I'm just waiting for the response.
Cool. I'll see it on archive then.
A very nice talk. I was just wondering how you deal with photography uncertainties and how they compare to the size of your box.
Sorry, could you say again?
Yeah, I was just wondering how you deal with photography uncertainties and how they compare to the size of your box that you've chosen for your FRB.
Okay. So for the photo Z uncertainties, what I basically did is that I calculate the photo, you mean the photo Z uncertainties of galaxies? Or, okay, so the photo Z uncertainties of galaxies is pretty much low compared to the redshift uncertainties of FRB. So basically, since I used this, I did not like focus on those kind of photo Z uncertainties.
Sorry, when you say redshift uncertainties of FRBs, so this is because you're using the dispersion measure as
Yes,
the redshift
yes.
estimate. I see. So do you worry about host contributions?
Then we have to look for spec C of FRBs if we want to look about host contribution.
Okay.
So, you mean in the dispersion measure? You're asking?
So you're using DM to convert to redshift. Right?
Okay.
So dealing with the host contribution.
At least for my case, the host contribution was somewhere around 10-20% of my error bar. 20 to 30% of my error bar, whereas the majority contribution came from the spread in the DMIGM. So I use the DMIGM to do my analysis.
Okay. Maybe we should talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's thank Vignesh again. Let's go to his online.
I should be able to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? I'm assuming people can see my screen. I can't hear you, so I don't know whether you can see my screen or not.
Manisha, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, the screen is visible now.
Oh, amazing. Cool.
Try shifting the slides just to check everything is right.
Uh-huh. Did that work?
Everything works good.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so
right.
Manisha Caleb. She's going to talk about long period transients.
Hi, everyone. Great. My name is Manisha Caleb, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Sydney. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person, but in my talk today, we're going to be exploring long period radio transients, what we've learned so far, how they might connect to FRBs, and why they're challenging our ideas about where and how coherent radio emission can occur. Now, I think this figure here quite nicely captures why the sources I'm talking about today are truly special. So this is the radio transient phase space, and it basically represents a framework for classifying and understanding transient radio sources based on their observational properties. So in this case, we've got specific luminosity on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, we've got variability timescale or the burst timescale. The 10 to the 12 brightness temperature line here, it basically separates the coherent emitters from the incoherent one. So you have a maximum brightness temperature for incoherent emitters, above which you need either coherent emission mechanisms or relativistic boosting. And you can see some examples of AGN up here, which require Doppler boosting. Now, what I'd like to do is draw your attention to the millisecond durations here, where we've got neutron stars in our own galaxy. And if you go up about 8 orders of magnitude, you come to the little cloud of fast radio bursts at extragalactic and cosmological distances. However, we see that a significant portion of this radio transient phase space remains unexplored. But with recent discoveries of these long period radio transients, we're starting to fill out some of these previously empty territories of phase space. And it turns out that this region of space was not actually physically empty. It was just previously uncharted. So these transients here are sort of appearing to blur the lines. And it raises a very fascinating question. Are these different types of coherent radio emitters, that is pulsars, FRBs, and these LPTs, are they somehow related? Do they maybe have similar emission mechanisms, or maybe even different evolutionary stages of the same progenitor? And do they just behave differently depending on the environment, the age, and the activity levels? But more than that, why is it that it took so long? Why did it take all these years for these long period transients to be discovered, right? We've known pulsars since the 1960s, but LPTs have become a class only as of 2021, 2022. It mostly comes down to how we search for these radio transients. Traditionally, we use time series analysis, where you slide a boxcar function across the data to match the shape of your pulse. And this method works really well for detecting short duration signals like the ones you see from pulsars and FRBs. It's efficient, it's computationally cheap, and it's absolutely brilliant for real-time commensal searches. But the catch here is that it is inherently limited by the width of the boxcar that you choose. And for real-time searches, you can't do an infinite number of boxcar searches. So this makes it much harder to pick up long duration signals like those from LPTs. Also, there's additionally the issue of non-stationary noise and baseline variations on long time scales. So to overcome the limitations of these traditional time series searches, we can turn to the image plane. So this approach, what we often refer to as fast imaging, it looks for transients in a series of short, regularly spaced snapshot images rather than relying on a single long exposure. Now, for example, here we've got a 1 hour observation with 8-second integration. which means you get 450 8-second images that you can then use to search for transients. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. You've got a stack of 8-second snapshots from Meerkat of the Vela X1 field. And we discovered a very exciting source here. So it had a period of 76 seconds and a width of just 300 milliseconds. And you can see that the source really nicely shows up in these individual snapshot images. And then you can also see the animation here. So we've seen, or rather established, that fast imaging is absolutely brilliant for detecting sources. But the beamform data, or the traditional time series data in this case, it does give us a wealth of information on pulse morphology and structure. And you can see in the dynamic spectra up here, this object, in my unbiased opinion, produces some of the most diverse and complex radio pulses that we've seen from a coherent emitter. And you can see these beautiful quasi-periodic pulses here. So these two types of searches are better visualized in the figure here, right? So traditionally, time series searches have focused on millisecond durations and short periods, while image plane searches have targeted much slower variables. So you've got supernovae and variable stars that vary over timescales of hours to days. But you see that these two searches, they leave a little gap. And LPTs fall right in the middle. Their pulse durations are too broad to be picked up efficiently by conventional time series searches here. And they're too narrow to stand out in the image stacks, which we integrate over long periods to study the transients or the variables that are in the yellow region here. So it's no surprise that we missed them. They simply fell between the cracks of our standard search techniques. It wasn't until short timescale imaging came along that this gap was bridged and we started filling out this region of space. But what is most intriguing, personally at least, is that the pulse morphology between these various classes of objects are incredibly similar. So here we've got a pulsar, we've got a fast radio bus, we've got magnet RXT 1810. I'm sure we'll hear about this from Yogesh. And then you've got some examples of these long period transients. The primary difference here is that the time scale on the x-axis is different. So you've got milliseconds in some cases, and then you've got seconds in some cases. But this difference could simply represent diverse sizes of emission regions and plasma densities. So what we're seeing here in all cases is they all exhibit some combination of amorphous structure with sharp peaks and then drops down to the noise level in between pulses, and then you've got these occasional quasi-periodic micropulses. So this suggests that the plasma responsible for these type of coherent bursts, they might share some physical traits, which then get imprinted on the dynamic spectrum, even if the physical mechanism behind their creation might be completely different. So narrowing down two classes of objects of interest, we know fast radio bursts are millisecond duration bursts of unknown origin. They originate well outside the Milky Way. They're mostly one-off events, but a small fraction have been observed to repeat. And the ones that do repeat are not truly periodic like we see in pulsars. They exhibit periods of activity and then periods of inactivity. Long period transients, on the other hand, are the complete opposite. Their durations are much longer, so hundreds of milliseconds to minutes. They're all galactic. And unlike FRBs, they are truly periodic with periods of minutes to hours. And many of these LPTs have multi-wavelength counterparts, unlike FRBs, for most of which we don't have a statistically significant counterpart. But why am I talking about these two objects now, right? It's because what ties these two seemingly different phenomena together is that they are both coherent radio emitters and likely involving compact objects. So they may share similar emission mechanisms. Maybe they're evolutionarily connected. Perhaps FRBs and LPTs share a common progenitor representing different stages or manifestations of the same underlying population. So what exactly are LPTs? First of all, LPTs are a phenomenon. I don't think of them as a class of objects. So because they are defined as highly polarized coherent radio bursts of unknown galactic origin in most cases. They're unusual because they've got extremely long periods. so much longer than typical pulsars, and their burst durations last second to minutes, again, much longer than typical pulsars. Some repeat regularly, like pulsars, others are more irregular, like intermittent pulsars, and some are truly transient in the sense that we've seen them active for short periods of time, of the order of a few months or weeks, and then they've never been seen again. Altogether, we've discovered, I think, less than 20 LPTs, but the number is slowly but steadily growing, and we're still very much in the early days. FRBs, as we know, are broadly classified as repeaters and non-repeaters, but LPTs have more classifications. Importantly, again, like I said, LPTs are phenomena, not a class, but you can classify the sources producing them into different types. You've got GCRTs, M12, Y12 binaries, long-period neutron stars, and others which are unknown or unclassified. The reason I have a question mark here is because long-period neutron stars sort of fall in this intermediate gray region where they sort of bridge the gap between traditional pulsars and neutron stars and what we call long-period transients. So these are the published sources in each category. Now, I must say this is not complete. But if you scan the QR code here, it will take you to an online database or a catalog where you can see the complete list. Now, there are many more GCRTs than the ones that I've listed here. But the reason I've only put this one here is because this is the only one that has a measured period. Quickly touching on M12, Y12 binaries, these seem to be the most popular type of long-period radio transients. So these systems are composed of a Y12 and a late-type main sequence star, which is detectable in the UV and optical. But unlike canonical neutron star pulsars, it's believed that the source of coherent radio emission here is intrinsically tied to binarity. And this is due to magnetic interaction between the neutron star and the massive companion. Now, since we don't typically have spin-down measurements for these systems, I've shown their periods as vertical lines here in the traditional PP dot diagram for neutron stars. Now, of the four systems that we know of, AR-SCO and J1912 are classified as intermediate polars. So this is where the Y12 spin is asynchronous, so shorter than the orbital period. But in contrast, the ILT source and the GleamX source, the spin appears to be synchronously locked with the orbital period, so it's typically a few hours. And this makes them more similar to the polar class of CVs or cataclysmic variables that are seen in the optical. Now, what is most interesting is that these sources give us a possible analogy with periodically repeating FRBs, where we have periods of activity and inactivity. So this would be FRB 121102 and 180916B. So in both cases, they could originate from highly magnetized neutron stars interacting with a massive stellar companion, with just scaled up energetics compared to the M12, Y12 systems that we're seeing here. So maybe there is something to be learned in terms of emission processes between LPTs and periodic FRBs. Now, just quickly looking at a few interesting sources, GPM 1839 was discovered in 2023 in the MWA Galactic Plane Survey during short time scale imaging searches. So this was discovered to have a period of 22 minutes. Meerkat beamformed follow-up observations showed that the pulses are like 5 minutes wide, and they exhibited quasi-periodic substructure and flat position angles. Archival searches in the radio data showed that the source had actually been active since 1988. But the reason we missed them was because, like we saw earlier, we weren't really probing this parameter space in the radio transient phase space using our traditional search methods. So it is likely that there are many more such long-lived sources in archival data. But something to note is that this source is also seen to exhibit short duration substructures with drifting behavior. And this is very commonly seen in repeating FRBs. So C1 here is the wideband component, and C2 and C3 are the narrowband emission components, with C3 appearing to drift. And this sort of frequency drifting behavior has been seen in FRBs, but also in solar bursts. But the ones that are seen in solar bursts typically involve longer time scales and slower frequency drift rates compared to the substructure that is seen here. So this substructure is actually more reminiscent of the drift rates witnessed in repeating FRBs. And here's an example. From CHIME. So this suggests possible shared emission mechanisms or propagation effects between this source and repeating FRBs, because these two, I think, look quite remarkably similar. The next source we'll look at is ASCAP 1935. So this was discovered while simultaneously monitoring a GRB and searching for pulses from an FRB. So Emil at CSIRO spotted this. He spotted bright pulses lasting about 10 to 50 seconds in an observation that lasted 6 hours. So this is the discovery light curve. And you can see that the pulses appear quite periodically every 54 minutes. And what I find interesting is that this light curve almost looks like it could be part of a binary system. The source actually sits, funnily enough, at the edge of the supernova remnant that hosts SGR 1935, which produced the galactic magneta. The table here shows the properties of the ASCAP pulses. So they've got typical widths, which are quite broad, high linear polarization, and a flat spectral index. We followed this up with ASCAP, and we saw that we didn't really detect pulses every period. And what I mean by that is the different colors here are the different observations, and every row is one rotation. So one rotation of 54 minutes. And you can see that even within a single 6-hour observation, you don't really see pulses at every rotation, which suggests that this is highly intermittent. We follow this up with Meerkat. We detected 2 pulses. So we did 5 separate 1-hour observations, detected 2 pulses in 2 of the 5 observations. And what was interesting that the properties of the Meerkat pulses were absolutely nothing like the ASCAP pulses. They were 370 milliseconds wide, highly circularly polarized, and steep spectral index. The only thing, or the only 2 reasons we figured that these pulses were from the same source was because the RM was the same and the coordinates were the same. And also, if you chuck the Meerkat TOAs into a timing solution, you can see that the puny little Meerkat pulses that you see here quite nicely line up with the other ASCAP pulses. So overall, the source exhibits 3 emission states. So you've got the bright pulse mode seen with ASCAP. You've got the weak pulse mode seen with Meerkat, and then you've got the quiescent or the nulling mode, which is seen by both telescope, which is quite similar to what you see in intermittent pulsars. The next source is ASCAP 1832. So this was discovered again by ASCAP, and it was observed to have a radio period of 44 minutes. High energy follow-up detected X-ray emission coincident with the radio period of 44 minutes. Given the pulse phase alignment, similar phase widths, and the X-ray, it suggests that the X-ray and radio emission probably originate from magnetically linked regions within the progenitor system. Whether this is a white dwarf or an old magneta, or the true nature of the source, I think is still open to interpretation, and no concrete result has been arrived at for this particular source. The last source I'm going to quickly touch on is ASCAP 1839. So this is very interesting because this has the longest period of about 6.5 hours. And the reason I say longest period is because this period is the rotation period. So what we observed is that this particular source emits radiation from both magnetic poles, and you have the main pulse, which is from the main pole, and then you have a little weak pulse that occurs at half the period. So this is the interpulse, and you see that it's about 180 degree separation in phase. We observed this again with Meerkat at U-band and S-band simultaneously, and you can see that the pulse widths vary, and this is again reminiscent of radius to frequency mapping, where the emission is located higher up in the magnetosphere at lower frequencies, causing broader pulses, and moves closer to the neutron star surface as the frequency increases. Ongoing monitoring since its discovery reveals a quite steady decline in flux density over time, and this is what you see in the right here. And this gradual fading is again reminiscent of the radial luminosity evolution seen in a handful of known radial magneta. So this suggests that 1839 might share similar evolutionary pathways or physical natures to those of radio-loud magnetars. More recently, a universal relation has been identified across pulsars, magnetars, and potentially fast radio bursts, linking the quasi-periodic microstructure or substructure in their radio emission to their rotational periods. So this again indicates that there may be some sort of an underlying shared emission process for all radio emitting neutron stars. And finally, so far, all confirmed LPTs are galactic. But I think if we ever detect an extragalactic LPT-like object, so this shaded pink region here, if you detect something here and that also emits short FRB-like pulses, that would be a smoking gun link between FRBs and LPTs, and also suggests possible shared emission mechanisms. So in summary, fast radio bursts and LPTs may seem like separate phenomena, but their shared characteristics suggest that they could be connected, perhaps even part of an evolutionary sequence involving magnetars or other compact objects. So by studying them together, we can begin to trace how coherent radio emission evolves over time and in different environments, because this will not only help us narrow down possible progenitor models, but it also sort of pushes us towards a more unified understanding of how nature can produce such coherent signals, but over a wide range of timescales. Thank you.
We have two quick questions. Unfortunately, we are doing bad with time.
I'm also happy for people to email me if they have questions.
Yeah, hello. It was a very interesting talk. I have a question. When you showed 4 dynamic spectra A, B, C, D labeled, I didn't quite catch what. Yeah, here, the downward
Yeah.
drifting. The
Oh,
next
yeah.
slide.
This
Yep.
one? Yeah.
What is the difference between A, B, C, D images?
Oh, so A is the observation. So they're just smooth components. I think they're just different models to show that you have a wideband component and a narrowband component that you need to model to actually reproduce what you observe. So A is what you observe, and B and C are just models for the wideband and the narrowband emission.
And D is, I suppose, the residuals after subtracting model?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so very interesting talk, Manisha. So for your this LPT 1935, you had detected in ASCAP and MeerKAT also, right? If I'm not wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
So there, the dispersion measure for ASCAP is not mentioned. So is this also the same?
That is an excellent question. So we were not able to measure a dispersion measure for ASCAP because with ASCAP, we only saw it in the imaging data. So it was 10-second snapshot images where we couldn't measure the dispersion measure. So the frequency is crunched as well. For MeerKAT, we got imaging data, but we also got beamform data. So it was only because we detected these narrow 370 millisecond pulses in search mode data. It was only because of that we were able to get a dispersion measure. So it's only from MeerKAT that we got a dispersion measure.
Okay. Yeah, thank
you. Is there any very quick question? Do you have
something quickly? So you classified some of the sources as probable white dwarf M dwarf associations and other as probable long period neutron stars. Are there any differences in terms of their emission properties that are standing out? Or is this classification just based on any kind of optical association?
That's, again, an excellent question. So how I classify them is, so I define LPTs as any object that produces highly polarized coherent radio emission with widths exceeding some, you can have an arbitrary number. So I think seconds to minutes. So anything with widths of seconds to minutes, and they are periodic on minutes to hour timescales. So M dwarf, white dwarf binaries all have counterparts, either in the UV or the optical. Long period neutron stars, for some of them, we've measured a P dot. And they have characteristics of neutron stars, and they don't have multi-wavelength counterparts. And everything in the unknown category, some of them have multi-wavelength counterparts. For example, 1832 minus 09 has X-ray emission, but it doesn't fall into either of these categories, which is why I've put them as unclassified.
Okay. Let's thank Manisha again, and sorry to cut short this. What would have been an interesting discussion session. Please post questions in the Slack. Our next speaker is Abhinav Narayan, and
Hello. So hello everyone. I am Abhinav. I am a JRF at IIT Indore, working in the group of Narendranath Patra. So today I'm going to talk about Garuda with TAB. We're looking for LPTs in the, or any transients in general in the GMRT archive. So this project is a collaboration between our lab in IIT Indore and NCRA with the group of Jayanta. So Manisha already talked a lot about LPTs, so I'm briefly going to give a background and just breeze through all this. So LPTs are a new class of objects, and these are all the radio transients we already know of. And they are new class of objects recently discovered, first in 2022, with periods in minutes or hours, long period transients. So here you can see a P versus P dot plot, and this is the neutron star zoo. So here are usually where neutron stars lie. And the gray region is basically the death zone, essentially, where radio emission from neutron stars, periodic emission is not theorized to be able to be detectable. So, but LPTs kind of challenge our understanding of these processes. So they all lie in the death zone. And this plot also Manisha showed. So this is basically the difference between coherent and incoherent emitters in radio transients. FRBs lie here, pulsars, X-ray binaries, AGNs. And in this part of the plot, there are the coherent emitters and these are the incoherent emitters. And LPTs are basically bridging the uncharted territory between them. And so what do we know about LPTs up till now? So they have periods of minutes to hours, pulse duration from seconds to minutes, highly polarized, coherent emission. They are all, up till now, have been detected only in the galactic plane, unknown, and no one knows exactly what the physical emission models are. Some of them are periodic, but they show variable behavior, like they emit in a time window and then they stop emitting. And some of them even have X-ray and optical counterparts. So I'll show later. So traditional searches miss LPTs because the single pulse search algorithms that in searching for transients and PA beam data, they are geared towards more much shorter time scales. And LPTs, as you know, the periods are much higher than that. There's also the thing about observational limitations. if a source has a period of 40 minutes and the observation only goes on for that part of the sky is only covered for half an hour, then you can easily miss that source. And sometimes the sources can be flagged as even as RFI because they're extremely bright most of the times. And so how do we, what do we do? We need a new kind of technique to detect new LPT, these kind of sources. So one way is to use imaging. In image plane searches, it's much easier to localize the source in the sky. And you can even look for the LPTs in archival data, and that solves the observational time problem. So just a brief background, this is the first LPT ever discovered. This was this Lame XJ16 18-minute period. It was actually discovered by MWA, and they saw bursts in going back 2 months in the archival data. And this source, extremely interesting, JPM J1839. Period is 21 minutes. Pulse duration is 30 seconds, 300 seconds. This source actually has been active since 1980s. And they actually found this source, exactly this source in the archives of many different telescopes, including VLA, GMRT, and many telescopes. So this means that sources like these are just sitting there waiting to be found. It's a very good opportunity to look for them in the archive, in the interferometric archives. So GMRT has more than 20 years of data in the archive. So what we have, we have undertaken is a project to kind of look for LPTs or any transient sources by imaging data in the interferometric archive of GMRT. So for this, our lab at IIT Indore have made this pipeline. It's called Garuda. And Garuda is a standard data reduction pipeline we have designed for GMRT. Written in Python, it's highly modular, uses Casa modules. Casa modules are parallelized and scalable processing. So undertaking a big server project like this on archival data, you need an algorithm, you need an alpha detection algorithm which is robust to many different kinds of observations and different kinds of data, bands and data. So for this, Garuda has a deep learning based flagging module. It's called GNet. So what is GNet? GNet is a unit-based segmentation model. We have tweaked the architecture of UNet and trained it on data we generated ourselves. It's the advantages of using a deep learning-based alpha detection model are essentially it's ease of use mostly. That is the most important advantage. So statistical methods like sum threshold that is used in AO flagger, they are very accurate, but they have a lot of tunable parameters. GNet only has 2 parameters. Statistical methods, they are not exactly reliable with data more than 50% corruption. GNet has been trained and tested on data with more than 80% corruption, even on GMRT band 2 data. And the trade-off is speed. Flaggers like AO flagger are an order of magnitude faster. But on GPU machines, GNet can perform almost real-time flagging with a throughput of 100 GB per hour, which is more than fast enough for our use case. The imaging process and all these things take much longer than the flagging. So these are some of the, it's not very visible here, but okay. So this is the output of GNet on band 3 and band 5 data. You can see in the spectrum RFIs here, and it has removed them. And the bottom plots are not very visible. Okay, so that's all for, I'll give a brief flow of the pipeline. So this is the It takes LTA files from GMRT archives, makes it into CASA-MS files. And the standard flagging procedure, people who attended the tutorial last week will be familiar with this. And we get the calibrated data after calibration. We parse it to our flagger, machine learning based flagger. We get the clean data. And from there, we can go to self-calibration imaging using WSLean. Spectral line imaging also, you take Lean Sophia. And these are the products that, data products that Garuda can provide. Continuum images, spectral cubes, snapshot images, and moment maps. For this project, we are particularly interested in the snapshot images. In the snapshot images of the data, we can find transient sources. So the problem now is finding transients in the, we already have good quality snapshot images. Now we have to find transients in them. So for that, we are using slow fast transients pipeline. It does image domain searches on snapshot images and makes a database and stores them there. It works quite well. And for post-processing type, the output of trap, Kshitij and me have written this module, which is called track, transient check. And it does, so essentially trap output can have a lot of false positives. We need to filter them out. And for that, we have devised the extra filtering methods using clustering, MAD filter, rolling median. And from there, we can crop the cubes around detected interesting sources and generate light curves and dynamic spectra as well from the interferometric data. So now I'm going to show you the workflow of the entire pipeline on how, starting from LTA images and to detecting transients in them. So this is what the project is called. It's called long period transients in GMRT archival data, LIGHT. So we give Garuda the GMRT LTA files. It processes them, calibrates, flags, images, makes snapshot images. For demonstration, I'm going to show this field. It is a supernova remnant field in which they detected this 21-minute LPT that I showed earlier. So this image, this is the continuum image that Garuda gave. And then when the snapshot images are given to trap, it gives us that there is an interesting source at this location. And then we just, we do further filtering by using track to check if it's a real source and it's not an artifact or something. And we get the light curves and the cropped cubes also. You can see the GIF of the source going. The only one pulse is shown here, this big one. And this is the GPM. This is actually the LPT that I was talking about earlier, which is detected in the archives of many telescopes, including GMRT. It's a 21-minute period. And we can also generate dynamic spectra from this observation. That was a GSB observation, actually. GAWB observations are much more sensitive, and we are extremely confident in the pipeline's ability to detect transients. So after that, we have Riptide to search for periodicity if there is enough pulses. Unfortunately, in this one, there are only 2 pulses, so we cannot do anything much about this. Actually, the Riptide output you can see here. This is the 76-second pulsar discovered by Manisha. So this is also we found in one this observation 41055 GWB observation, and you can see the pulses are clearly visible as well as the transient and the Riptide output for this periodicity 76 seconds, 75.9. And yeah, so this is another interesting source. This is the 44-minute LPT. This was in this observation DDT 3341, and this was also detected extremely reliably in our pipeline. And you can see like the pulses and the dynamic structure as well as the source. So yeah, so this is the summary. So what now? So what essentially we are doing is we are imaging the GMRT archive. We are restricting our analysis to galactic plane observations right now only, because most of the all the LPTs right now have been found only in the galactic plane. And we are detecting a lot of weird sources. Maybe we can, if someone is interested, we can talk about them later. And just to summarize my work, LPTs are, they are new and extremely interesting sources that challenge the understanding of neutron stars and periodic transients in the radio domain. Observational methods and observational biases, algorithmic biases make them difficult to detect. So we have made an image plane searching pipeline for GMRT, and it works really well. We already tested it on known LPTs that even Manisha even talked about, and we found them in the GMRT archive as well. And yeah, so the processing is ongoing, and let's hope next time anyone gives this talk, we have interesting sources to show. So thank you.
Hi. So my question is regarding the RFI AI-based classification. So what do you first convert it to dynamic spectra and then do you classify?
No. This is a completely okay. So this what I'm showing here is a baseline. So this is it's not very visible, but this is essentially the C4 C6 baseline in band 3. So this is interferometric. Data.
So for each baseline, you make this 2D metric and then do, or like what kind of data set do you use?
This is visibility. This is amplitude. And in the so RFIs, you can see that they don't follow the same features as the sky signal.
Okay. So this okay, well.
So are you? Can you elaborate a little?
So this is just one baseline, right?
Yeah, this is just one baseline.
So do it for all the baselines separately?
Yeah.
And
we run it on each baseline. Yeah.
And they are not connected because.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So very interesting talk. Have you observed any satellites?
Yeah.
Because I mean, this thing coming up with UE, MR.
Yeah, we have actually.
Can you please elaborate on that?
I can show you some of the gifts. Maybe Jayanta also. Yeah. So we have actually observed some satellites and transient phenomena like that. Actually, essentially sources moving in the sky. And those also show up in our pipeline, but they are not that frequent. Usually, when satellites are there, they cause extremely strong RFI, which are flagged. But sometimes, satellites can scatter radiation, which can be weak, and then that gets passed down, and then it can be seen in the image plane.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next question.
Hey, so it's really interesting about this RFI flagging method that you have mentioned. So I am curious as to how have you tried testing it and maybe benchmarking it with AO flagger? Because the advantage of having a lot of parameters in AO flagger is that you get really good accuracy with the flagging. So
you do get real good accuracy, and in general, it is also much faster. But the problem is that you have to tune the parameters for every data set.
Right? Yeah, but
so this is so I have this slide, comparison slide. So this is AO flagger, and this is TF crop, and this is band 3 data that I showed earlier, right? AO flagger does a reasonable job, but you can see it just removes the entire top part of the band. In the lower part, it's doing a reasonable job, but not above. In GNet also has removed a lot of the up part, but some of them is not. I mean, the overflagging problem in AO flagger is, I mean, you can obviously fix this. Someone expert in using AO flagger can tune the parameters to kind of mitigate this, but that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, so I was curious, will it not be more worth if we spend like time maybe finding a statistical method to evaluate the parameters for the AO flagger than this?
I mean, I guess so.
Because I think these issues will go if you just play around with the parameters.
Yeah, you can make this go away for this observation.
Yeah.
But what about something else?
Fine.
So this is a survey, right? This is a survey. So
yeah,
you need
I
it.
understand.
You cannot tweak it. You need to
What
run
I'm
continuously.
saying is you can come up with some statistical way to. Yeah, we can take it up later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi. Very interesting work. So I was just curious about how you do beam forming from the data that you already have. I guess you are.
We are not doing any beam. Okay, so this is completely interferometric observations.
Yeah, I got it. But when you say you run Riptide, that you're running on.
We are running Riptide on this light curve. This we get from the image plane.
Okay.
This is basically just okay. So what this light curve is just this thing in the middle. This is
For that particular
pixels,
pixel. For that particular pixel.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Pixel, the sum of these per pixels beam in the middle. Yeah.
Thanks, Abhinav. Let us thank
you.
again. And next speaker is Yogesh on FRB magnetic.
Good afternoon, everyone. After two interesting talks by Manisha and Abhinav on very exciting objects, let us get back to objects which, at least for now, seem to have more direct connections with FRBs. Initially, I thought of giving a broad overview on the observational connections of all the known magnetars, what we have, and their properties, how do they relate to FRBs. But what I ended up was focusing on just the energetics mostly, and also just one object. But yeah, I promised to share something interesting on this object. Okay, so before we go to the magnetars, when we talk about FRB sources, source models, or progenitors, the sources or their models have to at least account for all the properties which we know so far about FRBs. And some of those are listed here. So for example, the pulse widths, which nowadays the community is finding ultra fast radio burst, which means burst with widths as small as just hundreds of nanoseconds, which translates to very compact size of the emission region, which roughly can also translate to the source itself. Then for many FRBs and mostly the repeaters, we see narrowband emission. And sometimes, or yeah, many times this downward drifting in frequency also. Yeah, this drifting and narrowband emission, and I am trying to list those separately because we also see narrowband emission without the presence of this drifting. So any emission mechanism that explains the fast radio burst will also have to somehow generate these narrowband bursts, or have some other provision like plasma lensing or some other mechanism to limit their bandwidth. Then the polarization properties, which are not as easy to model, just because given the very huge diversity which we have been seeing in these bursts. And then, of course, apparently there seem to be two classes so far, repeaters and non-repeaters. And then the energies, and which I'll come back to. And then we have these associated continuum sources, which are again very compact, but with continuum emission, which also must tell us about the FRB source also, because these PRSs are surrounding those basic sources of FRBs. Okay, about the energies, and various versions of this plot have been seen, the latest one in Manisha's talk. And this has been the biggest puzzle since the beginning of, or since the discovery of FRBs. So what you see in this transient plane, most of the FRBs in this region with this spectral luminosity, which is a proxy of energy here, of the order of 10 to the power 31, or between this 5-6 orders of magnitude range. And then what we know from our galactic compact objects, mostly neutron stars, all those energies are like 10 or 12 orders of magnitude smaller. Same thing we can see here in this, where all the energies of FRBs are plotted in green vertical lines, and these are neutron stars. And yeah, no neutron star in our own galaxy, or whatever we had observed so far, was seen to reach the energies comparable to FRBs until this one orange line which you see, which was a burst from this particular magnetar, SGR 1935 plus 2154. Very fortunately, the same burst was detected by two different instruments. This one at L band using Stare 2 telescope, and this one using CHIME at 400 to 800 megahertz bandwidth. And this was exceptionally bright, 1.5 megazansky millisecond, that's the fluence unit. And simultaneously, an X-ray observation was also made. So this was really a very, very fortunate detection. And given this large energy, and yeah, I have this plot. So, and this energy of this burst in this plot will fall somewhere here. So this is the first time we saw something from a galactic object for which the energy is now comparing to fast radio burst. So this was the first observational evidence that yes, some of the FRBs can be generated by magnetars. And before this detection, as well as afterward this, magnetars have been focus of the possible sources of FRBs. And that is because magnetars have the highest magnetic field in the universe. And when we talk about FRBs and their extreme energies, we need some energy reservoir from which that energy can be tapped from. And that's what the magnetars provide in terms of their magnetic energy. I will not go in much detail of the theoretical categories of these models. I'm not also qualified for that, but broadly there are two categories. One where the fast radio bursts are generated closer to the source, most likely in the magnetosphere. And then another category where the bursts are generated a bit far away from the central engine, where the magnetar acts as a central engine. And yeah, hopefully tomorrow we'll have much more broader overview of the theories. Okay, so that was one burst. One burst is good. It tells us, it gives us an evidence that yes, it is possible magnetars can generate fast radio bursts. How many of those or how much fraction of FRBs can be generated from magnetars, we do not know. We have 30 odd objects which we know in our own galaxy which are currently active, but we saw it only from one. And then this magnetar, before this detection, most of the theories invoked very, very young magnetar. And this particular magnetar is very, very old. So there was a lot of material for theories from here. And then this became a focus anyway, because if we know that there is one object which can generate FRBs, we tend to observe it more regularly to get more bursts, get a statistic, and then that could provide us more clues of the emission mechanism. So far, that was a Megazansky burst, and after that, there have been only 2 more bursts. And so that was in 2020, and now we are in 2025. Only 2 more bursts with energies more than 10 kilozansky, and this was one of those. And again, detected by CHIME. It is about 10 kilozansky millisecond fluence. It looks noisy because CHIME was 100 degrees away, or CHIME's meridian was 100 degrees away from the source. But the burst was so bright that it just comes through whatever extreme side lobe they have. So this is again 400 to 800 megahertz. And fortunately for us, and very peculiar for this source, we also had a campaign running at the same time. We were observing using green bank telescope with much higher sensitivity and right at the source. And yeah, throughout the conference, we have been talking about getting more sensitivity, but I'm going to show some downsides of high sensitivity. This is what we saw. Yeah, we were as surprised when we saw it. So, and I can tell you that in this plot, there's a lot of signal, and there is nothing which can be said it's a conventional RFI. Okay, I'll take a minute or two. So usually, and this is not de-dispersed. Okay, this is raw dynamic spectrum. Usually, if you see a burst, we see this slope because of dispersion measure. And we know the dispersion measure of this source. And then I marked these bursts, B0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the original bursts from the source. So 4 bursts covering the full band, and this is in C band, about 1500 megahertz bandwidth. And this is a narrow band burst. So these 5 bursts were in the original band in which we were observing. Then this burst was so bright, you see this color change, and that is gain compression. This whole system just went into nonlinear regime, and yeah, nonlinear is only just a mild word here. There are many things happening. I don't know what all. So the gain has gone haywire. You see the gain coming back in steps here. You see the noise here becomes just flat, and that's again a gain issue. Then you see these bursts, which are not slanted according to what we would expect. And these are also parts of the same burst. So these bursts are very broadband. And these bursts continue up to 10 gigahertz or so, and I will show you that. So these are parts of the same burst outside our observation band, but then they have leaked through. That's the best word I can get for this audience. They have leaked through, and because they were, the back-end chain, the signal path that had flipped the band, we see those like this. But these can be unfolded in principle, and I will show you that version as well. And then, so with whatever is not marked here, those are artifacts from the system. Some of those we understand as ghost bursts. Again, some known idealities related to equivalent to polyphase filtering. And then a set of other minor artifacts here, which we have not understood exactly how and where in the signal path they have generated. But if we imagine that mixtures were behaving bad, which is a very fair possibility in this scenario. So apparent LO might have been different than what we were expecting. Then the remaining set of those minor artifacts can be explained as one category. Okay, so yeah, understanding all that and correcting for both took a very, very long time, but fast forward that very long time. These are those bursts now de-dispersed in the original observed C band. And these are unfolded ones now. These also separated as these 4 bursts, and 5th is just combined here. And since we know the exact time and the CHIME data is already out in Giri et al., we also know that this CHIME burst corresponds to this particular burst. Before I go to the next part, 2 main things I would say. So this is observed at 400 to 800 megahertz. This we have observed in our band 4.2 to 5.6 gigahertz. And then we have also observed in 7.8 to 9.2 gigahertz. So now we have observation of this single burst starting from 400 megahertz to almost 10 gigahertz. That's the brightest and the largest bandwidth burst what we have observed from magnetas. Then this burst, which is narrow band compared to other ones, so this is like 10 gigahertz bandwidth, and this one is certainly less than about 1.5 gigahertz. And these two are well within 100 milliseconds. So whatever the emission mechanism is, that should be able to generate very wide band bursts as well as very narrow band burst within that much small amount of time. Okay, now we have, so we can try to do flux calibration, but you see these flat tops, and that's also because of these bursts were saturated. I will not go in details, but we were able to still extrapolate and model those bursts. And so this is the full modeled burst, all the 5 of those, and we have to show it in log scale because they span 3 orders of magnitude here, from about 1 Jansky to 1 kilo Jansky. And this burst, which was simultaneous with chime, so this is the 10 gigahertz spectrum. This is a steep spectrum burst. And the next one, which is also again quite broad, but chime did not detect it, that seems to have flatter spectrum, and that may be the reason why chime did not have a detection of it. Okay, so including this burst, and not this particularly, I don't have a point for that here yet, but still the other burst from this magnetar and the brighter ones which we have observed, only this source is now trying to fill this gap between fast radio bursts and pulsars or neutron stars we have. And so there is a dearth of these bursts. And unless we have that, there will be many questions which we will not be able to answer. For example, we have observed FRB-like emission only from one of the magnetar. What's the role of properties of magnetar, for example, their magnetic fields or ages or their surrounding material in the emission of these fast radio bursts? Unless we have a sample of magnetars from which we can detect these bursts, we cannot answer or even try to model it to answer the question that what fraction of fast radio bursts can come from similar or these kind of magnetars. And then if we have these bursts from many of our galactic magnetars, these would provide a very unique opportunity, because although we see that fast radio bursts energies are like sampling this region, this is only limited by the distances of the FRBs and limitation of our instruments, sensitivity-wise. If these same FRBs were very close or in our own galaxy, we would have seen also the fainter counterparts of their bursts. So if we establish that yes, a good fraction of FRBs are coming from magnetars, and then magnetars in our own galaxy, we could observe much fainter bursts also. That effectively will allow us to probe low energy part distribution of the FRB energies. Okay, so what could be the way forward? I'm listing only 2 possibilities. It's left to our imagination. One is these bursts are rare, and that we know by now. And that's just because, 2 factors. We do not have like huge number of magnetars in our galaxy which are active. Their activity lifespans are smaller astronomically. And we do not have dedicated instruments which keep looking for bursts from these sources. So one option could be we have dedicated instruments which keep looking at that. We do not need a lot of sensitivity. We just need a lot of time on these sources. Second, we have a few and only a few magnetars which are sometimes active in radio. What we can do is when they are active, we do detailed studies of their low energy bursts, which are nowhere compared to FRBs energetically, but might have some other similar characteristics. For example, we see narrowband emission from one particular magnetar at least, and try to get more clues about the emission mechanism, or do a statistical analysis of the low energy burst and try to see whether from that particular magnetar in that particular state, will it be feasible to expect FRB-like burst? And there'll be 2 talks tomorrow focusing on this kind of analysis. With that, I'll stop here. And I think I will just leave you with the summary. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Questions?
Typical RFI, aggressive RFI clean will simply clean this part.
Sorry?
A typical RFI cleaning algorithm would simply clean this off.
Yeah, no, it just depends. Because these bursts are saturated, the signal to noise ratio is not that huge, right? You see here. And then it also depends on the particular RFI cleaning method.
This saturation happens.
But yes, I agree that, yeah, some of those bursts might get maybe, yeah, flagged easily.
Any other question to Yogesh?
Same slide 8, actually, those alias bursts looks like they have a slightly different DM, no?
Why would you say that?
From
this will be the version you should see, de-dispersed. You don't see any slope here. So because of those, so what you see here, so this is in this band. The frequency of these bursts is different. So their dispersion delays are different, which may not be very apparent from this plot.
Hello. At least the last two bursts should be similar, right? The aliased ones. One which is like across the entire band. The last one, on near 0.225 seconds.
This is not aliased. This is
No, the other one. Yep.
This is also not aliased.
That is also not an
no,
alias burst.
This is an artifact.
It's an artifact.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it's a real burst.
Yeah. No.
Is there any more question? If not, let us thank Yogesh. You have to. Let's thank Yogesh again. And our next speaker is Yash probing the local environment.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Yash. So I'll be talking about probing the local environment of repeating FRBs. So in this conference till now, we all have heard wonderful talks about fast radio burst, and most of them were concentrating on the burst part of the fast radio burst. That was the most of the talks were analyzing the time series data of the burst. And that's how I also started my PhD. But later, when the field progresses, we found a persistent radio emission, where in the radio images, we started seeing new things. And that's the condition of my other works right now. But yeah, moving on to the persistent radio emission. So persistent radio emission, as explained by Arvind, they are direct counterpart to FRBs and directly probes the local environment of the FRBs. And that helps a lot because that's the only long-lived counterpart that we see for FRB. And there are very few examples of the PRS till now. So There are only a handful of examples. So for example, these 3 FRBs, where for the first 2 FRBs, the PRS that we have seen was very bright, and both of them had the spectral nature of flatter spectra. For the third one, the PRS had a little bit different spectra. It had an inverted spectra, as well as the flux density of that PRS was very low. Now the question is, are the PRS only related spatially, or is there any physics that is governing the PRS and FRB connection? So I'll be briefly introducing some of the theoretical models, how they originate the FRB, as well as how they explains the PRS origin. So one of them is pulsar wind nebula model, where the central engine is a magnetar, compact object at the center, and there is a wind nebula around it. And the theory is FRB is coming from the central engine. It can come from either rotational energy or the magnetic energy of the magnetar. And the PRS is originating from the interaction of wind nebula with the circumstellar medium. That interaction are using shocks. Then there's another model, a hypernebula model, where again there's some compact object at the center, and the FRB origin is in the jet funnel, and that's from the shocks. And the PRS origin is a little bit away from the FRB origin, and it's because of the shock interactions with the circumstellar medium. Then there's another interesting model where it's an off-axis GRB. So let's say that we're observing somewhere here, and there's a compact object which emits the GRB, and the GRB was in that direction. And the same compact object is producing FRB somehow, and that we are detecting. And the PRS, the persistent radio emission that we are seeing, is coming from is as a afterglow of the GRB event, which may not be able to detect it. Then if the compact object is inside a supernova ejecta model, a supernova shell, and again the magnetar will be giving a FRB emission, and the PRS will be from the interaction of the ejecta with CSM. Now we have some theoretical background. With this motivation, we followed a lot of repeating FRBs with UGMRT, and the famous one in this conference 2024-0114A, which was explained by a lot of people. So I'll just speed up these slides. It was discovered by Chime and then localized by Meerkat and Evian. This is one of the bursts that we detected. You heard it in Ajay's talk. So we had monitored this burst using UGMRT in both 300 megahertz, 400 megahertz, as well as 650 megahertz, band 3 and band 4 respectively. And in band 4, we had around 10 hours of on-source time. This was spread over 4 epochs. And with that, we attempted to do imaging to look for any persistent emission. And we did detect a source in band 4. So left-hand side is band 4, which is 650 megahertz, and right-hand side is band 3 at 400 megahertz. In band 3, we did not detected any radio emission because our on-source time was low as compared to band 4. And the source that we detected was around 65 microjansky per beam. And the white circle represents the location where the FRB was detected. Now we do have a source which was like 8 sigma detection, but what we want to know is it associated spatially with FRB location or not? So for that, this is the location of the source in the image plane. First, we tried to find out the astrometric errors. So we cross-matched our detected sources with first catalog, and we estimated astrometric errors of 1 arc second and 1 arc second on both RA and DEC. Our minor beam size was around 3.8 arc seconds. And this was the Evian position of the FRB. And when we cross-match it, the source that we detect is within 1.2 sigma of the FRB position. So that means the emission that we see is at least spatially associated with the FRB position. Now, the emission can be also coming from the host galaxy. So to rule out that, so this FRB is residing in the satellite galaxy of a big cluster of the galaxies. And the SFR of this host galaxy is 0.06 solar masses per year. And from this SFR, we estimate the expected flux in the 650 megahertz band. That comes out to be only 6.5% of the peak flux that we are detecting. So whatever excess flux we are detecting is probably from another objects, and that gives rise to the PRS that points toward the PRS origin. Now we also try to model the spectra. So before us, there was a meerkat observation, and this was the same observation where they were able to localize the FRB. And I have shown that observation in red marks. This is flux versus frequency plot. Here you can also see there are faint circles. So those are the just fluxes with subbanded image measurements. And this was our observation of UGMRT. And later, there was also a 5 GHz observation by Bruni et al. With VLBA. And with this observation, it got also confirmed that the emission that we are seeing is from compact object. And with this, we can conclude that it's a PRS associated with FRB. And the spectra of this looks like very flat. The spectral index is minus 0.14. And if we see the subbanded structure, subbanded fluxes, we see that there is a turnover around 1 gigahertz. And later, it was confirmed by Zhang et al. That they detected a turnover at 1.6 gigahertz. So this is the first time we have seen a turnover in any PRS. Now moving on to the next FRB, that is FRB 2022-0912A. This is also followed by GMRT for a year at least. And this is one of the nice bursts that we detected. It has very good structure. And when we were following it, we did try to image it. And these are the results from the image. So this is at 650 megahertz, and we do detect a source. So we went to other bands. So there was a C-band observation. This was led by Sri Yash, and there also we detected a source of around 80 microjansky. And later there was also one more observation in band 5 by Pellissieri et al. And they also detected a source at 240 microjansky. Now we were very happy about it. But when we tried to find the spectral index, it came out to be minus 0.7, which is very close to what we expect from star forming region. And that also matches with the SFR estimations of greater than 0.1 solar masses per year. And VLBA also tried to look a compact emission, and they did not see a compact emission at 5 sigma limit of 80 microjansky. So whatever we detected is probably a host galaxy emission. Now moving on to the next FRBs. So these are the recent FRBs. It's 2023-0607A. The interesting part about this FRB is the rotation measure was very high, 12,000 radians per meter. And what we expect from the FRB PRS relation is that if the RM is high, the luminosity of the PRS should be high. So we were hoping to detect a source here. But when we tried to image both the FRBs, we did not detect a source. And these are the respective RMS. And from that, we were just able to put the upper limit on the source. So this shows that FRBs have, FRB PRS pairs have different, maybe different classes, where some of them only can have a PRS, or maybe all of them have a PRS and we are not able to detect it. So now to move further on with the detected PRS, we tried to put it in the context of the known progenitor models for the PRS. So there is a nice paper by Margaret et al. 2019, where they had made an analytical solution relating luminosity of the radio detected in the radio with ejecta and the energy injection rate of for the magnetar wind nebula model. So for this, one of the parameters that goes is also age, and this FRB, when it was first detected by Chime, and after 28 days, Meerkat had detection of a continuum source. So we keep the age as 28 days. This is the fastest discovered PRS till now. And with that age, when we tried to have the constraint between energy injection and the ejecta, we got these constraints. The shaded portions, the boxes, represent the typical parameter range for superluminous supernova, long GRB, baryon neutron star, and accelerated induced collapse of white dwarf. And with the minimum age of 28 days, we were able to rule out these regions. And with that region, we also ruled out the possibility of accelerated induced collapse of white dwarf. One more point to note that we even tried the same thing with minimum age of 1 day, and that line also is above the AIC limits. So For this particular FRB, I think we can maybe reject the hypothesis that this is coming from AIC, but the BNS and superluminous supernova and long GRB models are still feasible. Now we also tested some of the GRB afterglow model that I explained. So what we did is we used afterglow PY package which simulates a GRB afterglow, and we tried to match the expected flux with the observed flux. And so for this, we assumed a Gaussian structure jet and with different viewing angles. So I'll just explain this plot. So this is the relation between isotropic energy of the GRB, which we may not detected it because it was off axis, and then the electron density. And the colored points are the time in days after which this emission will give rise to the luminosities that we have detected. And so these are the allowed region which are in the colored points. The dashed lines in all the plots represent the typical range of the GRBs. So from this, we can say that this model is still feasible, but it will be interesting to see how it evolved, because GRB models also, with time, it evolves, and we can detect that. There's also luminosity and RM relation, where the relation is governed by this simple formula, where luminosity is proportional to the RM, where Xi represent the fraction of electrons which are participating in the synchrotron emission. Gamma is just the Lorentz factor, and R is the radius of the plasma which is contributing to the emission. So here, so we have just put limits on this, and these dotted, dashed, and straight line shows of fiducial limits of the with this parameter range. And this was first done by Bruni et al. And what we have seen is all the PRS lies in this limit. And for the new PRS that we detected, it falls somewhere here, which is also following the same limit. And we were hoping to see something for this FRB 2023-0607A, which had a RM of 12K, but we did not detect it, any PRS there. And if you want to rule out this theory or have a new data points which is not happy with this theory, that we at least need 2 orders of magnitude deep observation to say anything. And yeah, so I'll just summarize my talk. So we detected a PRS at 650 megahertz for FRB 2024-0114A with the 8 sigma detection. And we found out there is a turnover in the spectra, potential turnover. And later it was confirmed the actual turnover at 1.6 gigahertz. And we put these results in the context of some of the theoretical models. And most of the models are in the allowed region, that they still agree with whatever our observations are. And we are only able to root out the AIC progenitor for PRS. And for the other 3 FRBs, we for 2022-0912A, we detected a source, but it was most probably star forming region. And for these 2, we did not detect a source, and we were able to put the upper limits. Yeah, thanks. No, so in band 3, we did not had a good amount of on-source time. So band 4, we had 10 hours of on-source time, so we were able to see. But with whatever observations we had, band 3, we were not able to.
But you re-observe, right, in band 3 and see if the turnover is like low frequency also.
Oh, no, so the band 3 limit is somewhere here. So one of the problem with the band 3 observation is also there is a bright source between full width half maxima of the beam, and the deconvolution errors becomes very high. So that's why we are also not getting very good RMS.
Yeah, so can you go a slide for next slide? I think no, the place where you showed different models as per the Uh, yeah, this one. So the lines of for the ruled out, the boundary of the ruled out and non-ruled out, what were the data points? As in, were they on the both sides of the line or just one side? So how did you had these lines?
So there is a relation with luminosity, or that is the detected observable point between ejecta and energy injection, and time, the age of the PRS, and all other parameters we assume in some range where it's possible, and then just based on the age that the age must be greater than 28 days, the line will be somewhere here.
What's the age? What is this minimum age? Mean?
So here we have put the minimum age as the when the FRB was first discovered by Chen, that's the first detection, and when the first continuum emission was observed. So we took that as the minimum age of the PRS. It can be more than that, but this we know for sure that the minimum age is 28 days. So that's how we have a allowed region where the age can be anything more than 28 days, and that's how we ruled out this region.
So in one of the slides you mentioned that the star formation rate based luminosity estimate was lower than whatever was detected, and therefore you were able to rule out star formation. Do you worry about the fact that this star formation estimate is a global estimate basically coming from the full galaxy as opposed to just the local region of the FRB itself? And is there any way you could account for that?
That can always happen, that the global star formation rate is slightly lower than the local, and local has a very high star formation rate. But in case of this FRB, with the VLBI observations, you can confirm the compactness of the source, which was less than 0.7 parsec. So that gives more confidence. And also the spectra that we are seeing, it's almost flat. So that is one more thing. And also, since this was a satellite galaxy, the star formation rate for the central galaxy was much higher from this. And in the radio image, if we compare the location, the central galaxy's flux is much lesser than whatever we have detected here.
Yeah, just a quick comment that I think one of the useful ways to separate between some of the existing models for PRSs would be to actually have observations going beyond the gigahertz range. So either at high frequencies or lower frequencies, we expect to see turnovers of the spectrum. And especially the cooling break is directly indicative of the age. So if we have that, it will really help to disentangle some of what is going on here physically.
Yeah. Also for the cooling break, but the frequencies are like in the ALMA frequency range. And
it depends a lot on the model. Yeah, they can be anywhere between 10 gigahertz and orders of magnitude above that.
Okay. So for this particular FRB, we also followed it with VLA, and we have, I think, detection till 10 gigahertz, and that looks flatter.
Yeah, so that's very useful.
Okay, so let's thank Yash and all other speakers in the session.
So we'll come back at 4:35, little short T10, so that you can just continue.